The unsolved horror of the Villisca axe murder house. In the early hours of June 10, 1912, someone moved through a small Iowa farmhouse while 8 people slept inside. By sunrise, every member of the household was dead. The doors were locked, the windows were covered, the mirrors had been hidden beneath clothing, and the weapon had been left behind. Nothing valuable appeared to be missing. More than a century later, no one has been convicted, no motive has been proven, and one question still hangs over the quiet White House on East 2nd Street. Who entered the Moore home that night, and how did that person disappear without leaving an answer? Villisca was a railroad town in southwestern Iowa, the kind of place where neighbors recognized one another on the street and ordinary routines were easy to notice. In 1912, Josiah Joe Moore was a successful local businessman who sold farm equipment. He and his wife, Sarah, were active in their church and were raising 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. On Sunday, June 9, 2 sisters from a neighboring family, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were invited to spend the night. The 6 children ranged in age from 5 to 12. Nothing about the evening suggested that the Moore house was about to become the center of one of America's most enduring unsolved crimes. That night, the family and their guests attended a Children's Day program at the local Presbyterian church. Sarah helped organize the event, and the children took part in recitations and performances. The gathering continued until around 9:30 in the evening. Afterward, the Moores and the Stillinger sisters walked the short distance home. Accounts say the children had cookies and milk before everyone settled in for the night. It was a cool, damp evening. The town grew quiet, and the small wooden house stood dark near the railroad tracks. At some point after midnight, that normal Sunday became something else entirely. The precise sequence inside the house can never be known with certainty. Investigators believe the attacker used an axe that belonged to Josiah and had been kept on the property. The adults were found in one upstairs bedroom, 4 more children in another, and the Stillinger sisters in the downstairs guest room. The victims appeared to have been attacked while resting, although investigators believed one of the older girls may have awakened. The scene suggested deliberate movement from room to room, followed by strange actions that had nothing to do with theft. Faces were covered with bedding. Mirrors and glass panels were concealed. A lamp was found with its chimney removed and its flame turned low. These details would become central to every later theory, but none would identify the killer. Morning arrived, and the first warning was not a scream or a witness running into the street. It was the absence of routine. Mary Peckham, the Moore's next-door neighbor, noticed that the household had not awakened as usual. The animals had not been tended, and the children were expected to be preparing for school. She knocked, received no answer, and found the doors locked. After trying to determine whether the family had gone somewhere unexpectedly, she contacted Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. He arrived with a key and entered the house while Mary remained nearby. Ross first checked the lower floor. When he opened the guest bedroom, he saw enough to understand that something terrible had happened. He quickly left and asked for the town marshal, Hank Horton. Horton entered and found victims in every bedroom. An ordinary morning in Villisca collapsed into confusion. News spread through the town's telephone system, and residents rushed toward the house. Before trained authorities could establish control, the scene became crowded with curious townspeople, officials, relatives, and local residents. Some walked through rooms and handled objects. The National Guard eventually secured the property, but by then the damage to the investigation had already begun. That failure matters because the Villisca murders occurred before modern crime scene procedure. There was no DNA testing, no digital record, and no organized system for preserving every trace. Fingerprint methods existed, but they were not used consistently in small-town investigations. No complete photographic record was made before the rooms were disturbed. Witnesses entered at different times, objects were moved, and stories began spreading almost immediately. Every footprint, fiber, or mark that might have separated the killer from the crowd became harder to interpret. Villisca did not lose only 8 residents that morning. It may also have lost its best chance to learn who killed them. Even with the scene compromised, investigators noted several important facts. Robbery did not appear to be the motive. Money had been left in the home. The axe was found in the downstairs bedroom. The coverings over mirrors and windows suggested the attacker wanted darkness, concealment, or both. A plate of food and a bowl of water were reported in the kitchen, although later retellings have sometimes treated disputed details as absolute fact. Investigators also considered whether the killer had waited near the house or hidden inside before the family returned from church. Reports of cigarette remains and an impression in stored hay helped create that theory, but researchers have challenged parts of that evidence. The case was already becoming a mixture of documented fact, uncertain observation, and rumor. Even the locked doors created more questions than answers. They did not necessarily mean the attacker possessed a key, because the house could have been secured from outside after the crime. There was no documented sign of a violent break-in, but in an era when families often left doors accessible, that absence proved little. Investigators could not determine whether the killer followed the family home, entered earlier, or was admitted by someone who recognized him. A simple fact, the house was locked when Mary Peckham checked it, became the foundation for several incompatible stories. The coroner's inquest began on June 11th. Neighbors, employees, physicians, and relatives described what they had seen and what they knew about the Moore family. Their testimony established a broad timeline but did not reveal a reliable eyewitness to the crime. No one reported hearing a disturbance strong enough to identify the attacker. There was no proven murder weapon brought from outside, no confirmed stolen property, and no clear message explaining a motive. The killer may have known the layout of the home, or may simply have spent enough time watching it. The attacker may have been local, or may have arrived and escaped by rail. Each possibility seemed plausible, and that was precisely the problem. The first powerful theory focused on Frank F. Jones, a prominent businessman and Iowa state senator. Josiah Moore had once worked for Jones before leaving to establish a competing farm equipment business. Moore's departure reportedly cost Jones valuable customers and a major product account. In a small town, their rivalry was visible, and rumors added a more personal source of hostility. Some residents believed Jones had a motive to remove his former employee. But suspicion is not proof. Jones was never shown to have entered the house, and investigators produced no physical evidence connecting him to the crime. Years later, a detective named James Wilkerson claimed that Jones had hired William "Blackie" Mansfield to carry out the murders. Mansfield was arrested in 1916, and the accusation reopened old divisions across Villisca. Yet payroll records placed him in Illinois at the relevant time, giving him a strong alibi. He was released, later sued over the accusation, and won damages. The Jones theory survived because it offered a recognizable motive: business resentment, personal anger, and the possibility of a hired killer. But it never crossed the distance from a dramatic theory to a proven case. Another suspect, Andrew Sawyer, drew attention because of strange behavior reported by railroad workers. A foreman said Sawyer appeared in Creston on the morning after the murders with wet clothing and muddy shoes. He seemed intensely interested in newspaper reports about Villisca and made disturbing comments about the case. Yet officials later found evidence that he had been in Osceola on the night of the murders and had been placed on a train heading away from Villisca. Like many early suspects, Sawyer looked alarming when described in isolation, but the timeline weakened the accusation. Then there was Reverend George Jacqueline Kelly, the only person brought to trial for the crime. Kelly was an English-born traveling minister who had attended the Children's Day program on the night the Moore family died. He left Villisca by train early the next morning. In the weeks that followed, he wrote repeated letters about the murders, expressed unusual fascination with the case, and later returned to the house while presenting himself as someone involved in the investigation. His behavior made him difficult to ignore. It also created a question that investigators could not answer: was he revealing guilty knowledge, or was he an unstable man inserting himself into a famous tragedy? 5 years after the murders, authorities arrested Kelly. After a prolonged interrogation, he confessed, then withdrew the confession. The circumstances immediately created doubt about whether his statement was reliable. His first trial ended with a jury unable to reach a verdict. At a second trial, he was acquitted. The state had a confession, suspicious behavior, and proof that Kelly had been in Villisca, but it did not have dependable physical evidence placing him inside the Moore home. The legal system had examined the strongest case prosecutors could assemble and still failed to establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. For many people, Kelly remains the most obvious suspect. His presence at the church, his early departure, his letters, and his confession form a troubling pattern. But every point has a weakness. Being in town did not prove he entered the house. Leaving on an early train was consistent with travel plans as well as escape. His detailed interest could suggest knowledge, but it could also reflect obsession. Most importantly, the confession came after hours of questioning and was later recanted. Kelly may have been the killer, but the historical record does not allow that conclusion to be stated as fact. The case changed again when investigators and later researchers looked beyond Villisca. Similar family killings had occurred across the Midwest during the same era. Several took place near railway lines. In some, an axe or other household tool was used, victims were attacked at night, faces or mirrors were covered, and a low-burning lamp appeared at the scene. Just days before Villisca, a married couple was killed in Paola, Kansas, under circumstances that researchers considered disturbingly similar. The possibility emerged that the Moore family had not been targeted because of a local feud at all. They may have been victims of a traveling killer. This is the point where the mystery becomes larger than one house. If the Villisca crime belonged to a series, the killer may have studied isolated homes, traveled by train, used tools found on the property, and left before daylight. That would explain the lack of an obvious local motive. It could also explain why witnesses saw unfamiliar men around town without being able to identify them later. Modern authors have proposed different suspects, including convicted murderer Henry Lee Moore, who was unrelated to the family, and a traveling laborer named Paul Mueller. Yet these theories rely on patterns and reconstruction, not a surviving piece of evidence that conclusively connects one person to East 2nd Street. Pattern evidence can be powerful, but it can also mislead. Axes were common household tools in 1912. Railroads connected countless towns. Covering windows could serve the simple purpose of hiding movement inside a house. Similarities may reveal one offender, or they may reflect the conditions of the era. The serial killer theory solves one problem by explaining the missing motive, but creates another. Without reliable records, how can separate crimes be linked beyond coincidence? One detail seems to point outward, another back toward Villisca, and the investigation remains trapped between them. Meanwhile, the town had to bury 8 people. The Moore and Stillinger funeral was held on June 12 in Villisca's public square. Thousands attended, and the procession to the cemetery extended for dozens of carriages. The scale of the gathering showed how deeply the families were connected to the community. But grief soon hardened into accusation. Residents divided over suspects, churches, investigators, and political loyalties. The case damaged reputations and careers, especially that of Frank Jones, even though he was never convicted. For years, the murders remained not merely an unsolved file but an open wound inside the town. The shock also exposed how unprepared local authorities were for a crime of this scale. The Villisca investigation became part of a wider argument in Iowa over professional state-level investigative support. Later accounts connect the case to legislation that helped establish a predecessor of Iowa's modern Criminal Investigation Bureau. That institutional change could improve future cases, but it arrived too late for the Moore and Stillinger families. Villisca became an example of why evidence preservation, trained investigators, and coordination between agencies were not technical luxuries. They could determine whether a killer was identified or vanished into history. The investigation continued through grand juries, private detectives, lawsuits, and trials. Each new claim promised resolution and produced another layer of disagreement. Witness memories changed. Rumors became repeated until they sounded like evidence. Newspapers competed for dramatic details. The lack of an uncontaminated scene made later certainty almost impossible. Even a truthful witness could be challenged because so many people had entered the house and discussed what they saw. By the time the Kelly trials began in 1917, 5 years had passed, and time had weakened the case further. The house itself survived. Families lived there after the murders, and the building changed over the decades as plumbing, electricity, enclosed porches, and other modern features were added. In the 1990s, preservationists Martha and Darwin Lynn worked to return the structure to its 1912 appearance using old photographs and local accounts. The property was recognized on the National Register of Historic Places in 1997. The restoration removed many later changes and transformed the home into a place where visitors could confront the history in the physical space where it happened. That restoration also helped create the second Villisca mystery, the claim that the house is haunted. Visitors and paranormal investigators have reported footsteps, voices, moving shadows, sudden feelings of fear, and sounds they associate with children. Some say electronic equipment has recorded unexplained responses. The owners offer tours and overnight stays, and the farmhouse has appeared in paranormal programs and true crime documentaries. These reports are part of the house's modern history, but they are not scientific proof of supernatural activity. No recording or personal experience has established that the victims remain inside the building. There are ordinary reasons the house can feel unsettling. It is intentionally preserved to resemble an early 20th century home, without the comforts and noise of modern life. Visitors know what occurred there before they step through the door. At night, the wooden structure settles, distant trains pass, and expectation can turn small sounds into meaningful events. Human perception is especially sensitive in darkness and silence. None of that proves every report has an easy explanation, but it shows why the historical facts and paranormal claims must remain separate. The confirmed story is already disturbing enough. 8 people attended church, walked home, and went to sleep. Someone entered or was waiting for them. The person moved through the house, committed the crime, altered parts of the scene, and left without taking valuables. The investigation was damaged within hours. Numerous suspects were examined, one man was tried twice, and no conviction followed. Everything beyond those facts, whether the killer was a business enemy, a traveling minister, a hired man, or an unknown serial offender, remains a theory. The most reasonable explanation for why the case remains unsolved is not a conspiracy or a supernatural force. It is the combination of limited forensic science, severe contamination, unreliable rumors, weak physical evidence, and the passage of time. The killer benefited from an era when a person could board a train without identification, disappear into another town, and leave investigators with little more than witness descriptions. Even if the correct name appears somewhere in the old files, the evidence needed to prove it may have been lost on the morning the crowd entered the house. And that may be the true horror of Villisca. The white farmhouse still stands, but it cannot tell investigators which footsteps belong to the killer and which belong to the people who arrived afterward. The covered mirrors cannot explain whether they were meant to hide reflections, block light, or express some private ritual. The abandoned weapon cannot reveal the hand that used it. Every object offers a question, and every answer stops just before certainty. More than a century later, the Villisca Axe Murder House is both a preserved historic site and a symbol of an investigation that failed before it truly began. The victims are known. The night is known. Many of the movements inside the house can be reconstructed. But the person responsible remains outside the frame, protected by confusion, time, and missing evidence. Was the killer someone the Moors knew, a stranger traveling the railroad, or the man who later confessed and walked free? Which explanation do you believe, and what detail in the Villisca case refuses to let you dismiss the others?